All right, lesson 65. Yeah, 65. Who knows the memory verse?
Know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments to 1,000 generations. Deuteronomy 7:9. New one next week.
Yep.
Oh boy. Can't guarantee I'll get that one, John.
She's working with a handicap. How is he this morning?
Not too bad. Flying, but not too
Oh,
bad.
yeah,
He slept anyways.
he's kind of a baby with pain anyway.
Yeah, he admitted that straight up, huh?
Yeah, straight up.
I said we're blessed to have him.
He just doesn't do pain very well. He's the first one to admit it.
All right, so the Israelites have been wandering the wilderness for 40 years. The man who led them out of Egypt is now dead. God provided a new leader. Anybody remember his name? Joshua. Way to go, Terry. That's why we can't have nice things. Usually she says that to me, so it was my...
My jacket.
So what's the historical connection between Joshua as the leader and the spies he sent into Jericho?
He was one of the two spies that came back with a favorable report.
Yep.
from Caleb.
He was one of the spies 40 years earlier. Joshua commanded the people to prepare themselves to enter the promised land. Chapter 1, verses 10 and 11. As the spies returned with the news, the inhabitants were in fear of the Israelites. Chapter 2, verse 4. Joshua prepared to lead God's people into the land and he promised them through Abraham. Today we're going to look at how God brought them into the land and how the entrance was remembered. So after the battle with the Amorite kings, the ones Rahab heard about, to the land of the west of the Jordan was given to the Reubenites, Gadites, and the half of Manasseh tribe. Their warriors, along with the rest of the tribes, were to come to cross into the promised land, and for the next 4 lessons, we'll walk through this period of history. So we're going to start out today in Joshua chapter 3. We'll do 1 through 17. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out for Shittim, and they came to the Jordan, he and all the people of Israel, and lodged there before they passed over. And at the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priest, then you shall set out from that place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it, about 2,000 cubits in length. Do not come near it, in order that you may know the way you shall go. For you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. And Joshua said to the priests, take up the ark of the covenant, and pass on before the people. So they took on the ark of the covenant and went before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in sight of all of Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And as for you, command the priests to bear the ark of the covenant. When you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan. And Joshua said to the people of Israel, come, hear, and listen to the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, here is how you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, from each tribe a man. And when the soles of his feet of the priest bearing the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off from flowing, and the waters coming down from above shall stand in one heap. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, with the priest bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as soon as those bearing the ark had come as far as the Jordan, and the feet of the priest bearing the ark were dipped in the brinks of the water, now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of the harvest. The waters come down from above, stood, and rose up in a heap far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan. And those flowing down towards the sea of Arab, the salt sea, were completely cut off, and the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all of Israel was passing over on dry ground until all the nation finished passing over the Jordan. So what activity takes place in verse 1? Yeah, so Joshua leads them from Shittim to the Jordan. How does the timing relate from verses 111 and 211? 111 and 222. How long of a period of time? Three days. When did the people move? When the ark went by. Who was carrying the ark? Seem odd to anybody? They're not supposed to be the ones carrying it. Flip back to Numbers 4:15. It's like the Kohathites that are supposed to be bearing all the pieces of the tabernacle. But on this occasion, the Levitical priests do it. How far behind were they to follow the ark? Yeah. 2,000 cubits, about a half a mile. Why do you think that is? Bible doesn't tell us, but a lot of people say that, but they have to walk right by it in the Jordan. Because the priests, remember, they stay standing in the Jordan as everybody walks past. You're not to get too close to it. It's separated from everybody but the high priest most of the time. God. Yeah, they should be carrying this instance, but it's just different because he prescribed the Kohathites, or however you say their name, to be the ones that were to carry all that stuff from place to place as the tabernacle moved. But God was going to do a miracle here, so he put it with the Levite priests. I'm a pretty simple guy. I think it was a half a mile ahead, because how are you going to get 2 million people to see where they're going? Put it way off in the distance where even anybody in the group can still see until they get to the Jordan.
It may take that long, because if the first are the half mile away, you get all those thousands of people following.
Yeah. Yep. What did Joshua command the people to do in preparation? Sanctify, consecrate. What were the people to expect? Joshua told them to expect something.
Miracles.
Miracles. Miracles, miraculous signs. Now, what did God intend to do for Joshua? Yep. But, not what I'm looking for. You're going to exalt him in the sight of Israel. Exalt him in front of the people of Israel that he is the chosen leader that God chose. What did Joshua prophesy before the people? Yeah. So he prophesied. He told the people of God of all the prophecies. How did Joshua refer to God in verses 10 and 11? Living God lives amongst them. Next. God over what? All the earth. What was the miraculous sign intended to confirm for the people? That God would drive out all the people and give them the promised land. God was with them. What were the priests instructed to do at the river? Nope. Yep. Put their feet in the river and stand. Did you read the rest of it, that little footnote in that one verse? The Jordan floods the whole harvest season, so they're not like in a babbling brook. This would have been a raging river. Yeah, so it would have taken a bit of faith just to step out there into the raging river. How big is Jordan?
It's about the size of the Allegheny. I figure it's almost like the flooding in Asheville, North Carolina, when it came down through there.
Yeah, so it's normally the size of the Allegheny. Flood season, raging, way bigger. Yeah. What happened as the priest approached the Jordan River? Water stopped and walled up, and the rest of it ran out to the sea. What does the ark represent? Lord God, the presence of God with them. So how is the stopping of the water described? Stood and rose up as a heap, almost like it runs into an invisible wall. So what makes it clear that this is a miracle? Because I will tell you, it happens every so often that rivers stop and start to flow backwards. It's usually an earthquake. The dry ground makes it a miracle. Can't just write it off as a natural phenomenon that we see when an earthquake makes a river run backwards, because the priest, as soon as they stepped in the water, they stood on dry ground. And everybody who crossed stood on dry ground. Mm-hmm. So it takes that whole natural phenomenon out of it. Now, did God use an earthquake to move it? Maybe. But he still dried the ground to prove it was more than just a natural phenomenon. Yeah. Earthquakes they they shift the ground, then the water builds up, and then it starts to flow the wrong direction. So that could be described as a wall of water when it changes direction. But the dry ground makes it clear that that's not the case. Yeah. How long did this crossing take? This is a guess. Doesn't really tell you. Yeah. Several hours to cross a whole nation across the river. Yeah, it says, wasn't anything quick. The water stood there at a heap, at a dam.
Over into the promised land would have been so exciting. You'd think they'd have run.
You know how far away the water stopped from where they were crossing?
No idea.
About 15 miles upriver is where he stopped it. The ark was made out of acacia wood and covered in gold. I must have misheard you. How is the phrase Passover used in this passage? The phrase is used in verse 1, 11, 14, 16, and 17. Passing over the Jordan. Into what? The promised land. Passing over into the promised land.
Isn't something how important that is, but in the Bible, there's no capital letters for promised land. To me, that was important enough, it should have capital.
Yeah. I'll give you that. So God promised to give Abraham hundreds of years earlier all this land, and it's finally coming to fruition. And the land is now occupied by his descendants. The Israelites who had crossed the Red Sea were now between the ages of, anybody know? Most of them. Take Joshua and Caleb out. Who's the oldest? How old are they? 60. 60 would be the oldest. Why? Because everybody that's 20 or older died off. And then we spent 40 years in the wilderness. So the oldest person besides Joshua and Caleb, they're probably around 80-ish, would be 60. Down to 40 for everybody that was alive at the time. Newborns would now be 40 years old. Now there's still other children and stuff that are younger than that, but the...
How confusing do you think the people were that Moses didn't make it into the promised land after he led them so far?
Well, you notice how they're a little different with Joshua so far? They're not real rebellious, and because even Moses striking the rock got him disqualified for the promised land. And I think maybe that was a little bit of a turning point for them where they're like, well, if that little thing can mess it up, I don't want to spend another 40 years out here. Maybe we'll start to listen. It's terrible it took 41 years, but... So this crossing of this Jordan is not as dramatic as the Red Sea, but it's still something that nobody in that generation would ever forget. The waters stand up in a heap, the ground is dry, and the flood waters returned immediately as the priest stepped out of the water with the ark. It comes rushing right back down. So what do you think God's purpose for this miracle was? I'd say there's two. Show him his power. He's in control. He's with them. And what's it do for Joshua? Because remember, Joshua is the one that told the whole nation that this is what's going to happen. Yeah, it confirms his leadership role because God is telling them what's happened and they get to visually see it happening. Yep. Told you this was yours, and we don't want to argue over leaders again, so here's Joshua, and he's going to tell you what I'm going to do.
The ark went in first, the priest of the ark, and they were the last ones to come out. So all the other people rushed ahead of them.
Yeah, they would have went alongside him across. That's why when Ed said, keep your distance from it, I'm sure they still did, probably 20, 30 feet, but they would have got into the water and everybody would have crossed downstream a little bit. They might have even stayed to 2,000 cubits because we know that's only half a mile, and the river was stopped 15 miles upriver. So they might have stayed 2,000 feet away from the priest as they crossed too. I probably would at that point. Yeah. Yeah, 15 miles up and then the whole way to the sea on the other end. So they had, yeah.
There wasn't just a row of people walked off.
Yeah.
You imagine seeing that, like, if it was just some schmuck keeping his sheep, like the whole river just stopped.
Yeah,
You know, one of his tribes is occupying it.
yeah.
See the floating guy up?
I'd be like,
I'm pretty sure it was
Out of here.
honey, it's time to move.
But it also was important for God to show the people he was all powerful.
Yeah, because how often do we tend to forget he's all powerful? We worry about the stupidest little things.
We don't have to worry because God wants to hear from us.
Yeah,
He wants us to talk to him every day.
and if he's sovereign, he's in control, so. We might not understand it. It may not be fun, but we don't have to worry because he already knew it was going to happen. And whatever he planned on happening out of it is for, yeah, I do. He gives, well, no, not for worrying. I think that angers him because he specifically commands us not to. But I think he laughs at us when we do dumb stuff. You know, we laugh. We're made in his image, so I have to think he chuckles at some of the stupid things we do.
I think he laughs whenever he messes up our plan.
Oh, you're going to go there? No, no, no. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's like that saying, men plan and God laughs.
I know he was laughing whenever I found out I was pregnant with Claudia. I was like, seriously, I thought I was done. And he's like, yeah, you know.
I told you I was done. Yeah, you didn't have a say-so in it. Ask my mom. She knows all about that. All right, the 12 stones. We mentioned some foreshadowing in chapter 3 where Joshua chose 12 men. So let's find out what they did in chapter 4. We'll read verses 1 through 8, and then we'll skip down to 19 through 24. When all the nations had finished passing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Take 12 men from the people, from each tribe a man, and command them, saying, Take 12 stones from here out of the midst of the Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood firmly, and bring them over with you, and lay them down in a place where you lodge tonight." Then Joshua called the 12 men from the people of Israel, whom he had appointed, a man from each tribe. And Joshua said to them, "Pass on before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of the Jordan, and take up each of you a stone upon his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel. That this may be a sign among you, when your children ask in times to come, 'What do these stones mean to you?' Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, when it passed over the Jordan. The waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever." And the people of Israel did just as Joshua commanded, and they took up 12 stones out of the midst of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the people of Israel, just as the Lord told Joshua. And they carried them over with them to a place where they lodged and laid them down there. Verse 19. The people came out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they encamped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And these 12 stones, which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. And he said to the people of Israel, when your children ask their fathers in times to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let the children know Israel passed over this Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you to pass until you passed over. And the Lord your God, as the Lord your God did with the Red Sea, when he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So what was the task of the 12 representatives? Get stones. How big do you think the stones were? Pretty big. If I got to pick up a stone and put it on my shoulder to carry it across, that's a pretty big stone. You know, because I can carry pretty much. If I need my shoulder, it's pretty big. Where were the stones placed? Remember the name of the town? Gilgal. And what is their purpose? Yep. Be a conversation starter so parents can share with their children. I don't know when they got destroyed. There is still 12 stone pillars in Israel, but I don't think this one's still there. Not that I could find, anyhow. But they still do have them set up in different places. How did Joshua connect this crossing to the past? How it was just like the Red Sea crossing on dry ground. What two specific purposes of the miracles are given in verse 24? Yeah, and not just the Jewish people. The Canaanites, like we were talking, when they saw the river back up and dry ground appear, that put fear into you. I'm sure there's probably still some from Egypt that you would think after the law and everything by this point they'd have probably converted to Judaism or went back to Egypt, one of the many times they complained about it. So we've seen many times how prone the Israelites were to forget that all that God has done for them. They cross over these Jordan. These stones are set to be a memorial so that the adults can carry on and remind the children of all that God has done. And he does the same thing in our lives. He gives us opportunities to speak to our kids or younger people and pour into them and remind them, because I can't tell you when I was younger how many times I was flat broke and a check appears in the mail from some lawsuit I knew nothing about, and it gets me through to my next paycheck. I don't even know the insurance company or whatever, but I got a check and I made it to payday. You know, after praying for day after day, how am I going to make it to payday? You share that stuff with your kids, and they learn that through prayer they can depend on God, and God works in different ways for different people. But if we just keep it all to ourselves and never say nothing, guess who gets to learn that all on their own?
My children are now thanking me for taking them to church and to being with the church, and the way they know when they fall and they can come to the Lord. But most of my children are born again, and my grandchildren.
Yeah.
So I'm very blessed. The Lord has blessed me.
Yep. Yep, and that's our job, to pour into the next generation. Your kids, Everybody else's kids? Anybody younger than you? I was a bad kid? We all know this, Judy. You won't know the half of it.
But look how you turned out. This is great.
Yeah. But by the grace of God.
Do you think you gave God gray hair?
No, because before he created me, he knew what I was going to do. But if I could, I probably would have. I certainly gave it to my parents. But, yeah, thanks for that, Judy. Mm-hmm.
You know what, all of our children go through so much as they're growing up, but you can take them to church and do whatever you want, but they got free will. And whatever happens, mine were not angels, you know, and I had a lot of problems, but they learn.
Yeah.
They have to crawl before they can walk. And the word is what helps them grow and taking them to church and reminding them. And so that's why I'm blessed. The Lord gave me enough that I knew that my children were not angels yet. And they still aren't. They're like me. We fall, we get back up, and we ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
But that's what we do every day.
I don't think I'm exaggerating. I spent more time in a church as a kid than I do now.
Great.
And I was lost. You know. But when I came to faith, I didn't forget everything I learned. I had a great foundation to start building on.
The Lord is chasing you.
Yeah, I was a quick runner back in the day, I guess. Took him a while. No, I had a problem with pride. I can do it myself.
Yeah.
I can, you know, most guys have that problem. There's nothing I can't do. I'll figure it out. So my spiritual walk was the same way. You know, I went to church as a kid. I'm good. I got the rest. Never had a relationship. So he broke me down until I did.
That's when he can work with us, when he breaks our heart.
Yeah, and I try to warn my kids and young people, it's not always fun getting broken down. Sometimes he takes you to rock bottom just to get you to listen.
But it happens.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. To all of us at some point, but sometimes that's the only way we listen. So what attributes of God were to be recalled through the memorial? You don't have to use the big fancy words. Almighty, omnipotent, all-powerful.
And love. We forget he loves us so much.
Love.
That he made a way for them to the promised land and prepare them.
A big one, faithfulness. God is unchanging, same today, yesterday, tomorrow, and forevermore. So if he made a promise to Abraham, it didn't matter how bad they messed up in the wilderness, God was going to fulfill that promise. Doesn't matter how bad we mess up in our wilderness, God will fulfill his promise. Yeah, fear the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
He tells us to make a way where there seems to be no way.
Yeah, he's a way maker. But yeah, he'll close the door in your face, but there's an open window in the direction you're supposed to go. All right, you guys should have what? An activity next? Crossing parallels. As with many accounts in the Bible, there are parallel ideas presented in the Jordan and the Red Sea crossing. So let's look at them. I'll have to get this one out. Exodus 14:4 says, "And I will harden Pharaoh's heart." Yep, I'm on the right one. "And he will pursue them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord." And they did so. Compare that with Joshua 3:10. And Joshua said, "Here is how you shall go, that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites." So what's the common theme between them two? God's in control of what? Yep. God's power is displayed even amongst the pagan nations. Exodus 14, 19 and 20. Then the angel of God, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of God moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was a cloud in the darkness, and it lit up at night without no one coming near the other at night. Joshua 3:14. So when the people sat out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, with the priest bearing the Ark of the Covenant before the people. How are those two similar?
God's in the cloud and in the ark.
The presence of God was amongst them both times. Exodus 14:16. Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. 14:21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea and the Lord drove back the sea with a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Joshua 3:15 and 16. And as soon as those bearing the ark came as far as the Jordan, and their feet of the priest bearing the ark were dipped in the brink of the water, now the Jordan overflows on its banks throughout the harvest, the waters coming down above stood and rose up in a heap as far away as Adam, the city that is beside Zareth. How are those two similar? Waters parted. Dry ground. As God's commands were obeyed, the miracles occurred as the waters were parted or stopped. Yep. The first four at least had to have faith. They had to believe that what Joshua was telling them was from God. Otherwise, they're going to step in there right down the river.
Did Joshua raise a staff the way Moses did?
No.
To part the water?
Nope. The four guys stepped their toes in the water and it dried up. But you'll notice a key theme from Genesis to Revelation, and it's usually obedience. All right, what do we got next? Exodus 14:22. And the people of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on the right hand and to the left. And then Joshua 13:15 and 16 we just did too, so how are these similar? The water was parted in both of them in a visible way. They actually got to see the parting. Next one is 14:22, which you did, and Joshua 3:17 this time, so I'll read that one. Now the priest bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all of Israel was passed over the dry ground until the nation finished passing over the Jordan. Yeah, dry ground. Where there should be impassable mud, both places had dry ground. Exodus 14:26 through 28. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon the chariots, and upon the horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal course when the morning appeared. And the Egyptians fled into it, and the Lord threw the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots of all the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that had fallen into the sea. Not one of them remained. Joshua 14 through 18. I'll read 18 because we haven't done it yet. Yeah, I guess it's chapter 4, so we ain't done none of it yet. 15. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Command the priests bearing the ark of the testimony to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." And when the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord come up out of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet were lifted up on dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all the banks. That one's pretty easy. Yeah. As soon as they exited, water returned. I'll let you do the last few on your own because we're out of time. Any questions? All right, let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank for your faithfulness. We thank you that you're always with us, always leading and guiding us. And if we are obedient and stay in your will, you will guide us in the way that you want us and use us to glorify you and build your kingdom. We pray that we learn through the study of Scripture how to be obedient to you.